Well, I had to buy a new camera. My old camera I like better than my new camera, but this USB port quit working on me. So even though the camera is fine, I got no way to get anything out of this. This is actually a much better camera, I think. But what can you do? Anyway, I'm going to try something I've never tried before. This is going to be a reply to Enmendum. He's on the Gloom Boom Doom channel. So let's see how this here works.
Another day. Yeah. Alright, probably a long video. Piero, made some more garbage videos. Sort of related to a bunch of subjects that have been going on. I mean, everything's sort of related. So I'm going to be dealing with these words, freedom and responsibility again. But it relates to this free will crap, this idea of will. And how you have conversation and where's the base camp. So these are, if you've watched the Mystic videos in conference report, you'll understand what I just said. If you didn't, well, anyway.
Yeah, I've watched some of the Mystic videos. I haven't got a clue what the hell he's talking about. All I can figure is that the guy is growing some pretty weird mushrooms in that sheep shed.
Play along just for the hell of it. Alright. Biggest irritant I have with Pyro, now that I think about it, is this idea that he has he will concede something and the next day it's over, it's gone. That concession has been exploded.
You don't need to hear this, all I have to say.
Trouble having conversation with him. So anyway, they brought up this determinism thing, and some guy who's, sometimes on, sometimes off. I mean, I really like him, sometimes I really hate him, in terms of his comments.
Yeah, well, sometimes I say you're right because you're right, and sometimes I say you're wrong because you're wrong. Of course, you hate it when I do that. But, most of the time when you're just freaking out of your mind, I don't say anything at all.
Dinah Cat loves me. So anyway, Pyro linked to this guy's video, and so I watched a few minutes of it, and he was using radioactivity as evidence of randomness. I mean, at least he was reading from Wikipedia as if that was one of these open-ended curiosities that we haven't explained. But we know it's not.
I read one passage from Wikipedia and then said how bad it was.
Random. We know it's not unrelated to cause and effect. I mean, you come up with a whole bunch of models of the interior of these heavy elements that are radioactive. They have a huge number of electrons flying around.
Tritium. Tritium has one electron. One. It undergoes beta decay. Has a 12-year half-life, or 13, something between 12 and 13.
What's basically happening is that you can imagine our solar system just a little bit more crowded. And every now and then, every 10 million years, every 10 billion years, a comet will hit an Earth and smash it to bits, and little pieces will fly off. So we could call that radioactivity, some sort of event like that, a 1 in a billion year event.
What the hell are you talking about?
These atoms are
Oh my God. Radioactivity occurs in three types. There's alpha, beta, and electron capture, which is what gives off a gamma ray. What I was talking about with the I-125 is electron capture. That's where the charges in the nucleus are unbalanced, and that has to do with the interactions of the strong and weak nuclear force combined with the overabundance of protons and neutrons. Somehow, and this is all way beyond me, if I start talking about the weak force, I'll be talking out of my ass as much as you are, because there's no way you can talk about the weak force without knowing about stuff that I haven't even looked at in 20 years. And I'm sure there's stuff that's new now that I don't know anything about. And, I mean, if I start talking about the fermion with a 1/2 spin and the, what do they call it, the flavors, I think there's 6 flavors that are all involved in what weak forces do, I would be totally over my head and make an ass of myself. So I'm not going to try that. But but here's what I do know is that because the nucleus is unbalanced, it takes in a proton. It takes in an electron and combines an electron with a neutron, so that reduces its atomic number while maintaining its atomic weight, and it gives off a gamma ray, and it also gives off a neutrino. Now, I've never talked about the neutrino before because it was just an extra thing that would only confuse things, because there's no way to detect it anyway. I mean, under normal circumstances, there's no way. Now, yeah, my first video I did talk about an electron crashing into a neutron. It was colorful language, but it was not accurate, okay? I mean, it's the nucleus that causes the radioactivity. If you look at alpha radiation, it's the nucleus. Beta radiation, which is what happens in tritium, it's in the nucleus. There it actually gives off an electron. You know, what you're doing here is just ignoring the problem. You're like one of these Christians who are saying, how can we have evolved from apes when they're still apes? I mean, it's on the same damn level. Jesus. You're making an ass of yourself here.
Side of this material, and they're all decaying the same way. They're all having 1 in a billion year events. And so if you have a billion of them, you have an event every day. Yeah, it just works out that way.
I don't even know if that makes any sense.
If I have a bunch of guys sitting on the ground with
probably
a gun,
makes some kind of weird sense.
Shoot straight up in the air, and they're, say, a little bit apart from each other, farther enough not to shoot each other, and they just keep shooting bullets up in the air, 1 a day, and I have a million of them. Well,
okay, you got a million guys shooting bullets up in the air. Why? Because they want to see if somebody gets hit by one. Isn't there something circular in that as far as cause and effect? I don't know. It's very weird. Okay, so you're saying a million people will shoot a bullet up in the air, and then somebody will eventually get hit, and then that's going to be non-random? Why is it going to be non-random? Why would that be non-random? I don't see that.
Only one day will actually accomplish the feat of shooting the bullet up and having it land on their own head. Yeah. And so some days 3 of them will go. You know, some days none. Yeah, that's the way it'll work out. But it's not gonna...
Yeah, okay. So why is that not random? You're saying it is obviously not random. It's not obvious to me that that's not random. Other than the fact that it's not random that a million people were shooting guns into the air, that doesn't seem random. That seems like something that would have to be carefully set up. But I don't know.
To be random, there is cause and effect. So it's just
okay, yeah, there's cause and effect.
You know, when
Who
it
says there
comes to
isn't?
the Earth, it didn't come from nowhere. It has a huge, long history of its own. The Earth has a huge, long history of its own, and the paths were established, you know, billions and billions of years ago. And so the inevitable event will take place. So anyway, it's just irritating. Randomness is just a perception based on your inability to frame a circumstance. Okay, you cannot...
You know, my degrees are in biology. So that's one reason I don't have the confidence to talk about the weak force. But a lot of times in biology we have to carry out a pretty careful, pretty complex calculation to prove that what we're saying is not random. So I don't understand why it is we would have to carry out a complicated I don't see why it is we would carry out a complex calculation to prove that something isn't something that doesn't exist. Good Lord, I mean, how do you explain inheritance without random? How do you explain it? Genetic inheritance.
Understand the relationship between billions of objects. Okay, in a bucket. It's way too complicated.
A lot more than billions.
But there isn't anything spontaneous taking place, and there's nothing random. So anyway, fuck that shit. But obviously, by our perception, it's going to look random because we're on this very slow...
And what has this got to do with your basic arguments that you're making about antinatalism and economics and all this other stuff that you talk about? Every single one of them is just as valid or invalid as the case may be. Even if we do live in a non-deterministic universe with free will, it's all just as valid or invalid. And, in fact, what you're doing makes a whole lot more sense if it's a non-deterministic free will universe. I mean, think about it. You're trying to get people to come around, and they're only going to do that in your universe if it was decided back in the Big Bang that they were going to do that. And you don't know whether they were going to do it or not. But whether you do what you do or not doesn't make any difference. They're still going to do the same thing, right? They're going to come around. But on the other hand, you don't have any choice. You have to do what you're doing. Oh well. And there's no point in me talking to you about it because it doesn't matter. You're either going to... You've already decided one way or the other, right? Okay, whatever.
Really, really fast. And so zillions of things can happen while the speed of light is speed of lighting. In each little second, there is room for whole complex systems to be created and collapse. That's just the reality. A second is a huge amount of time, but we just don't know it because we're big, slow, and clunky. But there's no random fuckers. All right. Now, even if there was, we've been through this argument. Randomness would do nothing to create anything called free will. So it'd be absolutely...
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Randomness would do nothing to create free will. Problem is that you people are using the fact that there is no randomness in your version of the world to say, aha, there is no free will because there is no random. In other words, you're saying it's a deterministic universe. Therefore, there can be no free will. Now, we could have a non-deterministic universe and still have no free will. That's a separate argument. But once you have a deterministic universe, then you can have free will. And this is where you're trying to take a shortcut to no free will, is by saying we have a deterministic universe. We don't.
Useless. Now, I've made this video before, at least 4 times, 5 times. There is nothing. Freedom is an idiotic word. Can we establish this as a premise? Freedom is a word invented by people who were just making relative comparisons. They were saying, hey, I'm not in a cage. Therefore, I'm free. That's all.
Freedom is a word with many meanings and many nuances, yes. No argument. It's not an idiotic word, though. I mean, it is a word that means something. It means a lot of things to different people, but it does mean something. Now, when you say free will, it's hard to know exactly what you mean. I agree with you. But we've got to say something, and what we always say when we're talking about this nebulous concept is free will. It's just the term that's been agreed on. What term do you want to use?
Freedom is the removal of encumbrance. Okay? It's the absence of encumbrance.
It's one definition.
It's not anything in and of itself. It is made by an encumbrance. The encumbrance defines what freedom you have, what encumbrances exist. Obviously, I'm not free to be a concert pianist. It just can't happen, all right? It just can't.
Well, that all depends. Maybe it could have if you'd wanted to be long ago. It's not going to happen now, no. Of course, yeah, you know more about you than I do, so maybe it could never have happened, you know. So what? What does that prove?
I have to learn how to be one. I can't just right now say, I'm going to... No, I can't. I'm going to recite the speech that Theodore Bungelfung gave at the Kiwanis meeting in 1938. I can't do it. All right? It's not there.
No, but you could go look it up if you wanted to and learn it if you are able to learn speeches like that. I've never been very good at memorizing stuff like that.
I've been exposed to it. I haven't learned it. It's not going to happen. So obviously I have freedom as limited by my exposure and my experience. That's just a fact. Now let's figure out whether my exposure and experience has some, as if there's a me in here that's going to be free to choose.
Yeah, this is where it gets nutty.
Me is what happens. Me is the guy, the program that wins. So I could walk down this trail 500 times, meet a girl. Now each time I'll react a little subtly different. Some days I'll be feeling confident, just have a good mood. Some days I'll be feeling insecure and I don't feel well, so I just like, oh yeah, hey, hey, walk by. And other days I'm going to feel like maybe it's worth trying and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to have different software, different programs in my head are going to be stronger or weaker on any given day. And that will decide what my end...
Alright, I don't know about using... Yeah, okay, fine. We'll use programs as a metaphor. But there's only one real program. The rest are subroutines of that program. Ah, jeez. Okay, you've got the internal conversation that's always going on. You have the subroutines that are going on. No question about that. A lot of this stuff is not free will. Absolutely not. Some of it is semi-free. The only thing that's really free is this conversation inside of yourself that you're having with yourself, but it's not to anyone except itself. Both you and the modernistic have both noted how screwed up the language is when we're talking about this stuff, so you know, that's just the way it goes. I mean, imagine a hunter walking, looking for a rabbit 1,000,000 years ago. Imagine if, because he had this new advanced brain, I guess not 1,000,000 years ago, we'll make him human, make it 50,000 years ago. Because he has this new advanced brain, imagine that new advanced brain had take over all those things that were automatic when he was, well, his ancestors were lower mammals. You know, suppose you had to actually think about each muscle group that you were going to move as you walk, and how impossible it would be to exist in the world with something like that. That's one of the reasons we can't get robots to work. A lot of this stuff doesn't even involve the brain once you get it started. And once you start walking, the impulses don't go all the way back to the brain. You've got a subroutine that's monitoring it, and you got another subroutine that's watching where things are, so that if you're walking through the woods and you see a snake, okay, you stop. You don't walk into it, you know. It's very complicated, and it's not free will, a lot of it. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't like this. Using a computer as a metaphor for the brain is useful, but I don't know. It's too useful. It's used too much. Sometimes people seem to forget the difference.
Behavior will be. Now, it'll have nothing to do with will. It will just have to do with circumstance. Period. And the coalescing, the mood, the rumble, the vibration, the nuance of where the trains are inside my brain at that particular moment. But I will have no freedom. The trains are on tracks. The whole thing is regulated by my life experience, my genetic initial disposition. All of these things have determined who I am, what I will say, how I will say it. And so this conversation is beneath the time it has to be spent arguing. It's inane to have to go over and over this. This is a rock solid, airtight description of our circumstance. You have no freedom because there is no such thing as freedom. And secondly, there's no fucking such thing as you. Okay, you're a brain. Your brain subconsciously defines you. And it doesn't do it by, I'm going to sit here and think about it, and I'm going to blah, 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 blah. There's no little you inside.
I'm not a brain. I'm a brain and a skull and eyeballs and a nose. I got hands. I got internal organs. I can name most of them, but why take out video? It's all me. That's all me.
Can we at least agree on that? There's no little you inside your head being you. There's your...
Who said there was? There's a master controller, which is carrying on this internal conversation and is now in charge of speaking to you in this video. But I don't know what he loses me here. And then he starts talking about this base camp shit that the muddled mystic has come up with. I don't know if you saw the... Well, no, I'm not even going to get into that.
Experience. And your experience, just like the sentence I just spoke, comes from your subconscious. It arises through you, and you say, wow, I was pretty interesting just now. And you re-experience yourself. And all of that causes and affects your brain and creates the next sentence you utter. That's it.
Where's the science behind all this? Where's the evidence? Who's written this down in books that I can read that would agree with you? Who isn't a nut and isn't known to be a nut?
It's cause and fucking effect. It's not free, and it's not a you. All right.
Who is it?
Now, there was a related subject. Oh yeah, back to this idea of establishing a base camp. You know, some sort of foundation for how this shit is going to be discussed, or
They're inventing their own new language.
And so I did want to talk about, this might be unrelated to this, but we'll see. So Nick is...
Actually, I don't know if that's true. I just...
Video,
seems like that.
Still, how exactly the fact that consciousness, you know, is an effect. It's a nuance of arrangement, and how somehow that nuance isn't substantially different. Again, he's just still saying rock is rock, chemistry is chemistry, and it's just not. There is a difference, a distinction.
Okay, I missed something in there. There was some part where he was talking about meeting a girl on one of his walks.
I think a meaningful one.
It must have been in there. I mean, I played the whole thing through up to there, so it must have come up. And so I was going to say something about that.